Hi, I'm Clara, and this is the Practice with Clara podcast, where we go into philosophy and all things yoga related, which has been my passion for the last 20 years. This week's episode ends our chakra series, so we're on the seventh chakra, the crown chakra. We had my friend and fellow colleague Erin Moon, who teaches anatomy for my teacher trainings, on this week's episode. We go into what is the seventh chakra, what's happening in energetic world, as well as Erin talks about what's happening physically. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, and we hope you enjoy this week's episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Practice with Clara podcast. You're sitting with Stephanie.
I'm Clara.
And today we have a special guest with us, Erin Moon.
Hello.
And so I just want to give a little bit of background to Erin and my relationship. So Erin and I go back quite a while, back to New York City. I'd say maybe over a decade ago, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we used to both teach and practice at a studio in Midtown, New York, Manhattan. And I moved to Vancouver 2006. And then I actually moved back to New York in, I think, 2012. And at that point, Erin was about to move to Vancouver. We connected back in New York, and I gave her lots of tips about Vancouver, and she moved to Vancouver. And then I moved back to Vancouver. And since then, we have been tag teaming teacher training, both the 300 and 200 hour yoga teacher training. And so 200 hours, the foundational training, and 300 hours continuing education. And Erin is probably one of my favorite people to work with, in the fact that she is super enthusiastic and specializes in anatomy and making it fun and interactive. And she's also, one of the biggest things I love about Erin is that she asks a lot of really good questions. And so we wanted to bring her onto the podcast today because she's got amazing insight. She's done so much training and so much reflection in her own life that we thought she'd be a wonderful addition to our conversation. And we wanted to share her passion with you guys.
Thank you so much for having me. That was like the nicest intro ever. Thank you.
So happy that you made the time to come see us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I thought we'd start with just a few random questions for Erin to get to know, for our audience to get to know you. So the first one is, would you rather be a monarch butterfly or a moth?
Ooh. Wow. Well, I really love to travel. So I lean toward monarch butterfly, just because, I mean, that's some travel. That is some serious hardcore travel.
Where do monarch? I don't actually know this. Where do monarch butterflies travel to?
So to Mexico. So it's not far from Mexico City. I'm not sure of the exact place, so excuse my ignorance. But it's a huge, like, I saw them on my aunt's farm outside of Toronto, Ontario. And I have a friend who just went with her mother to, like, the pilgrimage of the monarch butterfly, which is, I think, well, it might be south of Mexico City, but it's close to Mexico City, like not a flight away, like a drive away. And they all gather there and cover the trees. So the trees are covered in monarch butterflies. And maybe that's also a thing that I kind of like about them, is they seem to travel in groups. Like it's a mass migration. And so maybe I like that too. Yeah, I'm going with monarch.
I just learned something.
I know. I was like, no question. I was like, me too. I'm like, okay, mind blown. Cool. What's the next one?
What's your favorite way to prepare a potato to eat?
Oh, that's good. Oh, I love mashed potatoes. Yeah, I was gonna say fries, because everything deep fried is made from the gods, but I do think like a really good, creamy, awesome mashed potatoes, and I kind of love making them too. There's something really awesome about changing the form of something to that degree, which is like, wow, it's like art, like clay, same kind of thing. Yeah.
What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Oh, good. I mean, I do, things by myself in the bathroom, but I'd also So after that, that's a consistent. I'm a lucky girl. I'm not gonna lie. Hey, everyone should celebrate a BM. Okay.
I agree.
I love the candor.
I agree. Because you're
but
a healthy girl.
Yeah, I'm a healthy girl. So that's usually my wake up. It's like, oh, gotta wake up now. But then if I'm being my most healthy self, I do a sadhana and meditation. If I'm being my most healthy self. Yeah.
And when you're being your most unhealthy self.
Oh, I just keep sleeping. Like
okay, great.
Like I do that awful sleep through, like where your whole body wakes up, you even go to the bathroom, then you come back to bed, and then you're like, and then you wake up and you're like, yeah, if I'm being my not so fantastic self, that's what I do. And I'm also a big breakfast eater. So no matter what routine happens early, I am give me a big old breakfast. It's one of my biggest meals of the day. Like I don't eat much in the middle of the day, but I tend to eat at the ends of the day. And so that's also that's a big part of my morning ritual.
What's something that you tend to avoid?
Toxic people.
Say that again.
Toxic people.
Okay.
That's not, you know what, that's a real crappy, am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's actually a shitty thing to say. So not toxic people, because I don't actually think people are innately toxic. I think that there's a lot of reasons why people behave the way that they do. So I will say negativity. I avoid negativity, and that doesn't mean someone who expresses negative emotion or is maybe in a place that we have said is negative, but that kind of place or conversation that makes people smaller. I don't love to be around people who thrive in making people smaller. I usually I'll just take myself out of the situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that I avoid. Yeah.
Okay, last one. A character from a book or a movie or a play you've seen that you would love to embody, like be this character for the day.
Oh, so many.
I know. I was like, Erin's also an actor, so
yeah.
This is so good.
Yeah, I mean, depends on the mood. Whether I want to be Juliet or the Tomb Raider lady. Like, I mean, truth be told. You know, lately in my acting work, I've been doing a lot of really cool either young adult characters or young or adults that are in the 20s or early 30s who wield magic. And that it's something that I never read a lot of as a child, and I'm reading a lot of it for my work, and then I get to embody that in some small manner. But I would love to like feel what it's like to have magic rise through my body and then be able to actually wield it with my hands. That would be so amazing. That would be so cool.
Don't you do Reiki? And Reiki that
Yeah, it's gentler though.
Okay.
Yeah, and it does kind of have that same through line, like as far as you are not the holder of the thing. Like I'm not, a Reiki master, a Reiki practitioner is not the holder of the energy. They are the conduit for the energy, the acceptor and receptor and transmitter of that energy. But it's not like you are the thing. So in that same way, a lot of the magic stuff that I'm reading or the fantasy stuff that I'm reading, they have the ability, much like you're given the ability to pass on Reiki, and they practice in that same way. But it's like, I want to be able to like see green light come out of my fingertips, as opposed to internally seeing that energy pass. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you.
Great question, Steph. Good job.
Yeah, those are fun.
Great answers.
Yeah.
I love that the light kind of leads us into the theme of the week. So the crown chakra, we're ending with the 7th chakra from our series today. And I wanted to anchor one last time with a quote from the book from Anodea, Judith, Wheels of Life. You have gone on a journey. You have touched, you have tasted, you have seen, and you have heard. You have loved and lost and loved again. You have learned, you have grown, you have arrived at your destination intact.
Good. One more time.
Mm-hmm.
You have gone on a journey. You have touched, you have tasted, you have seen, and you have heard. You have loved and lost and loved again. You have learned, you have grown. You have arrived at your destination intact.
So why did you choose this, Steph?
It summarizes kind of the journey we've been on. Mm-hmm. I feel up Sushumna, all of the chakras have now come together and we've arrived at the top. We've arrived at our destination intact. I love how this kind of complements the process we've been on for 6 weeks and the landing point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this idea of intact is really beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like we are whole. And that's kind of the idea, especially with Anodea Judith's theory around the chakras and kind of working with them. It's like working with each of them kind of brings us back to wholeness, mm-hmm. keeps us intact.
So, Erin, what we usually do with the chakras is we talk about the themes around the chakra, the imbalances, and the blockages. So I'd like to open it to you and Clara to discuss some of the themes, blockages, and imbalances that you worked with around the 7th chakra, or could just identify, like loosely based, to introduce our listeners to Sahasrara?
Sahasrara.
Sahasrara.
Yeah. Two R's. Those 2 R's are killer.
Yeah,
okay.
It's spelled Sahasrara, but it's Sahasrara.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rolls off the tongue.
It does. It's the easiest one. Now that we've hit number 7, let's give us the.
It's the 1,000 petals. It's like Sahasrara. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Petal.
Yeah, petal. Another syllable.
Yeah. Do you have a relationship to the 7th chakra, or any thoughts about it, Erin?
Yeah. So I think I'll leave a lot of the details of that to you because your studies are a lot deeper as a whole in this system than mine are. But one of the things when what first came up as I thought, oh, and it's funny because I think oh and I think up, and so I'm gesturing up if you're listening as opposed to watching, and so it's just to me what's so interesting is a lot of the language around it speaks to different types of intelligence, mm-hmm. And different types of conscious thinking and consciousness, right? And consciousness beyond our comprehension of consciousness beyond the consciousness that we are currently able to wrap our brains around or able to intellectualize. And then also what happens kind of when we are separated from our ability to digest at that level. Because I feel like there's a lot of digestion actually that happens at the crown chakra. And a lot of when it was first introduced to me, it always just felt like everything was going up and that it was all about everything was about connection to the divine. And I was like, I had certainly at the early stages, I was still trying to figure out what the heck that meant to me, or what that was being redefined coming from a Judeo-Christian background, and deciding that wasn't something that I connected with anymore. And so this idea that it was like everything's going straight up brought back right away this sense of, oh, it's like to a God, to a thing, to a singular, to the singular, right? And what I love about being with ideas longer and growing up and learning more about myself is that digestion aspect of what intelligence is, mm-hmm. when it's used well, right? Because we can over-intellectualize things and we can over-analyze things and we can become trapped in that place. And that's when you get into issues within the aspects of the crown chakra as well. But I love the idea that it is actually a digestion point as well. Mm-hmm. It feels like each one it has a different digestion, the process of energy needs needs to be able to flow through it like our digestive system. It needs to break its bits apart again. You know, like they break apart, they grow at a root, and then they break apart a little bit and they become something more, and then they break apart, just like the petals continue to grow. And so I feel like at this place of so many petals, it's kind of like we've broken apart all of the food, and we've broken apart all the learning, and we've broken apart all these kind of places that say an idea or an energy or a journey goes on. And now we're at another level of digestion, which is its beauty and its trappings.
Yes.
Because it can be this like piecing apart, but you can get trapped in the piecing apart, and then it actually goes back down, as opposed to allowing that piecing apart to just dapple into the ether, you know, like to become another connection point. I was reading what you were talking about, an Anahata Chakra, and just that idea of connection, and that if we are not connecting, and so if it's just a connection in one direction to a singular thing, that's harder for me personally to understand than if I've pieced it apart, so now it can be beyond me. Yes. And that what comes in and what comes out has little pieces, as opposed to like a laser beam of light.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just kind of working on what Erin's saying here is like the crown chakra is we talked about the throat chakra being a portal between the exoteric and the esoteric. And then I feel like the crown chakra is the portal between us as an individual and then us as a collective. And so the collective, so the crown chakra is kind of like, and Erin's kind of, if you're just listening versus watching, Erin's been doing these beautiful movements with her hands up at the crown chakra, essentially talking about how the crown chakra is thought of, or some people speak of it is the energy just goes up, meaning that who we think we are unites with greater self, God, divinity, whatever word, you know, and she was kind of talking a lot about it in terms of a singular thing, right? Or is it like the collective, what we call the collective consciousness? So the collective consciousness lives outside of us, like all around us. And then the crown, when we connect to the crown, when we open that up, we're essentially, the way that I think about it is like it opens up a vortex for us to be able to kind of pile in and listen to, right, what is happening around us, okay? Yeah. And so why it is the last one that we generally work on is that we have to work on ourselves. We have to work on first the most tangible parts of us, which is like the root chakra and the second chakra. So our bottom ones are our most tangible physical parts of our body. And then the higher up we go, the more it becomes esoteric, meaning something that that is not tangible. It is something that is experienced versus seen, right? And so consciousness, or let's just say like the collective consciousness, and I'm going to define that by saying like, how am I had it. So hold on. I'll just step back for a minute. So have you ever had that experience? I'm asking the listeners as well as my two beautiful friends here, where either you're teaching a class or you go to a class and whatever the teacher is speaking about or what you're speaking about, people relate to it. Like either you're like, oh my God, like that's exactly what I was thinking about, or, you know, I've had students say that to me. And that to me is connecting to the collective consciousness, because we generally we're generally drinking, this is a weird thing to say, but generally drinking like the same kind of Kool-Aid. Like if you're kind of tapped in, you're connected to the river of thought that's kind of going on around us, okay? And so what I love about why sharing with other people is such a profound experience, or being with other people, is because you realize that you're not the only one going through whatever it is that you're going through. Most of the time, there's definitely times when you're like, I'm alone on this one. But generally, you know, like and so that's to me how I would define collective consciousness. There's definitely other definitions of it, but that's the way that I would think about it. And so it steps us out of, and we talked about this, I can't remember, a couple weeks ago, right? Alan Watts' idea of the bug's eye view versus the bird's eye view. And the bug's eye view is like what we experience is like what Clara experiences as herself right in front of her, all the things that are happening in front of her, right? And that's the bug's eye view. It's my identity. And then when we're able to kind of step back, gain perspective, right? Meditation is a big part of crown and third chakra in terms of practices. It gives us this widened perspective, which allows us to kind of see the bigger picture, which again, to me, I would define as our collective consciousness or unconsciousness, depending on who you talk to. So what I love that Erin was talking about is that we can also, like, the downfall of that kind of opening of the portal is it can become overwhelming, where you kind of start to nitpick. I'm doing not as beautifully as Erin, but like having my hands up by my head, right? And kind of like, it's kind of like little fragments coming in instead of allowing it to be this like, this widening of taking it all in versus little pieces. Am I?
Oh, totally. And I think that so many thoughts. And one of them just at the end of that is the element of surrender that is inherent in this chakra. Like that in the same way that in meditation, there is a sense of like, when you're not surrendering, surrendering to your seated time, where you're like, well, sometimes is what comes from surrendering, because that's where your mind is, but also that sense that you have to, in some way, trust. You have to trust in some manner that you don't have to know everything, and that you can't know everything, and you can't hold everything in your brain, and yet at the same time you do. Yes. It's like you're leaning in the same way as I think of like in our working and friend relationship, where there are things that you hold that I don't hold. Like I don't have literally intelligence that I don't hold, knowing, learning that I don't have, and that's fine with me, because I can lean to your brain and lean to your soul and lean to your life experience and lean to your philosophizing. And I can lean into those things to expand my own opportunity to pontificate or to think about something or to have something land. Because I surrender to the fact that I can't hold everything, can't know everything. And so I'm the best that I am at this moment. Yeah. So surrender.
What I'd love to do now is actually lean into you in terms of anatomically or energetically, in terms of either TCM or the Reiki, like what happens in the crown chakra? What's happening up here?
Yeah. So when you started reflecting back some of the things and expanding upon what I said, there's just a part of me that lit up so bright, because if you think about anatomically where the crown chakra lives, right, in our head, at the top of our head, and if you think of our anatomy in our body, and you think of the gross aspects of those, so inside this dome of our skull, there aren't bones, right? So so it's this big space with a lot of tiny, weeny little neurons with receptors and all these really cool, like what's happening up there is so unfathomably awesome. Unfathomably, gotta surrender a lot of that. But also it's these tiny little gorgeous pieces, like it's where, and then if you think down to the root chakra and you think of the bony structure and the force that goes through that part of the body, what it holds anatomically, like the amount of energy that goes and passes through that very intense structures, the deepest joint that you have in your body is your hips, is your femur into your acetabulum, and so meaning your big ball of your hip, your leg bone into your socket, right? So if you think about that structure and that there's a keystone, like in the arch of the body, that there's this structure that has been used in the creation of buildings out of cement, And
so the keystone, just for our listeners.
Oh, the keystone is your sacrum. Yeah. And so if you think of the gross structures that exist in these two places, and I say this as Clara knows, it's like I always picture this really enlightened being like in the middle of the Ganges, like meditating or on a hill in its true sense and from the root of where these practices come from. And I think, oh my God, you can intuit that. That you can intuit without having any sort of, they weren't doing any sort of dissection or anything like that. You can intuit that there's this space upstairs that is full of these tiny little bits and pieces that talk to one another, and they can talk really, really fast, or they can talk in flow, and they receive in different ways and give off in different ways. And then at the base of that structure is this like architecture that of the being, so that's one of the first things I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I've never thought of neurons in regards to Sahasrara. Yeah. No.
It's a hard one. It's a hard
one.
Say
it one more time. Say it because we should all be better. Sahasrara.
But don't do the second ra. Sahasrara.
Oh, don't do the second. Sahasrara.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just confusing because there's an extra ra. So people are like, ra? I'm like, well, it's pronounced Sahasrara, but yes, there is an extra ra in there for, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a silent ra. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So one of the questions at this chakra is the idea of pondering who am I, and then your place in the world, like how you belong. And Erin, you're kind of talking about that when you say like, I recognize the strengths Clara has, I don't have those strengths, but we can come together. So it's kind of identifying where you are and then how you interact within the collective. And you can call that the collective in terms of the world we see around us, or the collective unconscious, as you were speaking to previously. And I thought it would be interesting, and it's funny, Erin, that you brought it up, to kind of note how both of you are yoga instructors, but have taken very unique paths in how you teach and the styles you teach. So Clara, in terms of, you're transitioning in your practice now with the prenatal, but more vinyasa, power, and philosophy is the general vibe I get from you. And then Erin, coming from more therapeutics, the reiki, restorative, and anatomy. So 2 yoga teachers with very diverse backgrounds, and then kind of what inspired you towards your preference and how and what you teach.
That was a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. No.
Yeah, it's great.
Kind of move. Yeah, you can move in any direction. It's beautiful.
Yeah, totally. Do you want to go for it?
Yes.
Oh, me. Oh, okay. It's interesting because in some ways as well, I don't know, I'm not going to speak to your journey. So for me, a lot of the reason why I rooted into anatomy and that really lit me up in the first teacher training I did in 2004, because I was struggling with spirituality as a whole. I was struggling with disengaging myself from a Judeo-Christian background and trying to figure out what happens if I take the God element out, and because it was like a white dude in the sky, and that seemed really reductive and kind of didn't work for me. And I knew there was something else, but then it's like a journey that you go through to try to re-find what that means to you innately. And so part of why I leaned into anatomy really quickly is because it felt tangible. It felt like, and I needed to work in that body place. And it took a while for me to be able to come to philosophy, and be able to redefine what the word God was. And so a lot of that was wrapped up in spirituality. Like, it was harder for me to parse out philosophy from spirituality, from religion. And so that journey was a lot of the reason kind of why I went into, when I first came into the yoga world, I went more into anatomy. It just really, really lit me up. And then as the progression toward new, understanding of spirituality within myself started to grow, then I started looking at how these two elements that seemingly, or were always posed to me as two different elements, as spirituality and body work, were 100% wrapped in within one another, and that we were that you essentially couldn't do one without the other, in its wholeness. In the same way that I'm a believer, like psychoanalysis is super, super important for fundamentally great mental health, and somatopsychotherapy is too, and embodied psychotherapy is as well. And that's where the yoga therapy to me comes in, where I don't have, again, the skill set that a psychotherapist might have, or I don't have the skill set of a really intense spiritual leader, because it's not a lineage that is innate to me and my upbringing. So what I have tried to find is, how do I support an ability for a body, to a person, to connect to all things within themselves, out externally, to be able to get to the point where surrender isn't a fear, to get to the point where connection isn't fearful. And a lot of that, to me, is my work is about being with people and their bodies on a very subtle level. So it's actually been a progression, because I come from a vinyasa background. That's my formal training was in vinyasa, both of them. And it's over the years that because of my own life journey as well, needed to kind of figure out what also that work is at a down-regulated place, or what is that work when I can't connect to those upper levels of the chakra system, or I can't be with my thoughts because my body is hurting so badly from loss, particularly in my own life journey. And so, I think a lot of things around who am I and how I'm showing up is something that's unfolding. And it's another thing that we hold, that ideally we're going to hold lightly, because every time we define it, we put the walls around it. And then if that's what we say we are and why we're here, then we're not open. We're actually shutting off the crown chakra. To come back to this world, is we need to continually be able to evolve. And so in that, as I've watched so many of my friends, their practices individually have evolved because of all sorts of life circumstances, and what we come into this life with, what we go through at early stages of life, and then what we go through at latter stages of life. And I feel like my journey with the entry point it's funny, because I feel like Clara and I are getting closer and closer and closer, through our curiosity and friendship, and also just life journey. Yeah, I don't know if that's kind of, I went all over the place. So
that's great. Just before Clara, you go, someone recently shared with me that patience is having an appreciation for every phase of life that you're in. And it just, your last comment, Erin, made me think of that as just accepting where you're at, being patient with it, and honoring the process and the kind of metamorphosis as you evolve and keep developing the who am I. So, and I love that, because I'd never considered patience in that way. It's just appreciating the phase of life you're in and the change that's eventually going to come.
Yeah. And it was never presented to me like that. Like the who am I question in so much of my life was never presented to me like that. Like everything was so binary, and like blowing apart the binary in so many things in the world and in our lives and in our bodies is like fundamentally important to those little bits and pieces and that larger availability for connection.
Yeah.
Both ways. Yeah, that's interesting.
Totally.
That was so nice to hear. We've been working together so long, but I'd never heard you share your journey in that way. So that was really beautiful. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Riffing on what Erin said in terms of the way that we are coming closer together, I guess I've been trying to remember, I think we've been working together for about 5 years. 4 years.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
6, yeah, right. 5 or 6 years. And kind of where we both were 5 or 6 years ago and where we are today is much closer than we were. And what we both mean by that is, as Erin said, we both actually trained at the exact same school in New York, which was a vinyasa school. And then we went our separate ways. Like I left the country and Erin kept enjoying the Big Apple. That when we came back together, when I moved here, 2015 or 2014 is when I moved back. I was still very deep in the world of fire, meaning the world of vinyasa yoga. But in that same breath, I'm going to pause that and actually give a little bit of feedback, or a little bit of context first, is what I've realized. So Erin and I did the same training and we got very different things out of that training. So I'll start there. So I remember my first 200 hour, we both did it at a place called Sonic Yoga with Jonathan Fields and Lauren Hanna. I was very much connected to the spiritual aspect, the philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, that kind of thing. And I feel like I don't even know if I could tell you what I learned in the anatomy portion of the 200 hour. Like I feel like I glazed over and maybe just looked out the window a lot. Like nothing of all what felt like Latin was landing. But one thing that I appreciated that they said, and we say it in our teacher training, Erin and I say it in our teacher training, is like, what lands now is what needs to speak to you. And then like, as you go further and further into your process as a teacher or into your learning, other parts are going to speak to you differently. So for me, the anatomy, I was like, this is definitely Latin. And all these syllables, I was like, thigh bone, got it, femur, not so much. So that's the direction that I went for quite a few years, is I just dived really deep into the spiritual aspects of the practice. And I figured like the thigh bone's the thigh bone and, it's doing its thing and that's great. And then I started getting really injured because I have a hypermobile body. And unfortunately, at least with some of the schools of yoga that I was practicing in New York, it was really upheld for us to go deeper, faster into poses. And so I could do that with cold, like I didn't have to warm up my body. And so I would just do it. And then all of a sudden I was like limping and my lower back hurt and I had pain in my shoulder and da-da-da. So through the journey of injury, I actually had some dear friends who are massage therapists, and I would go to them. And then as they were working on my body, I started asking them questions of like, what are you touching right now? Like, why is this happening? And I'll show them like the movements that I was doing. And then they would explain to me that these kinds of movements with this range of motion, and this is what happened. And so I started to get very, very interested in what was happening physically, because I was like, if this yoga is supposed to be working, why am I hurting so much? Right? Yeah. I was like, I went through and stuff, and I've gone through phases in the yoga practice where I was like, this fucking sucks. I don't know if we're allowed to actually curse, but we'll figure that out. Because I was like, why am I'm in so much pain? Like if we're supposed to do this kind of practice every single day, like this isn't working. I'm breaking down. I'm literally breaking down. Yeah. But I'm so grateful that I broke down, because it gave me a joie de vivre about anatomy that I'd never had before. And then all of a sudden it was like, all I wanted to do was talk about anatomy. And then I had friends who were studied more anatomy-based styles, Anusara and Iyengar being one of them. We won't get into the politics of either of those two styles, but one thing we'll just say about those two styles is that they really are thinking about things in terms of alignment anatomical. So I started to dive into that, and that got very exciting. And it got very exciting because I realized one day that like, if I continued practicing the way that I did, I would, by the time I was 50, I would like need 2 hip replacements, and I probably would have, I would just be a mess. So I started thinking a lot about sustainability and how can I practice specifically vinyasa yoga, and then I dived into other styles, but specifically vinyasa yoga in a way that is sustainable, so that I can do it every day, and I'm not worried about, the parts of my body being so open, going too deep. So it was such a it was such an eye opener for me. And because of that, then I started to move towards, and it's interesting because I think we move towards the slower aspects of the practice for different, again, from different places, right? I think I won't again speak to your journey, but more you're moving from a place of emotional / mental place, right? That's what you said. Like I needed to kind of step down, and for me, I needed to downgrade and slow down because my physicality wasn't holding up, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna make it. And then I realized that by slowing down and by doing slower practices, so let's be specific, like restorative yoga, gentle hatha yoga, yin, those kinds of styles, like the slower styles, really fed me in a way that I was able to do my more fiery practices in a holistic approach, as well as teaching vinyasa from a holistic approach. This is really long and winded, so thanks everybody.
No,
that's
great.
So it's so interesting. Yeah, it is. We come from such different places. Is why Erin and I think, love each other so much. We come from such different places, but we're walking the same path. We just kind of like our entrances onto the highway of knowledge were different. Like, we were like, we came on, but we're still moving through. And what's fun about our relationship is that, and I'll just, again, give some context, is like, Erin and I think the first couple of trainings that we've done together, we actually were away and we were roommates and bedmates. Like we were sharing a bed. And so we really got to know each other really well. And late at night, we would sit and like geek out. We'd be like, okay, so like, talk to me about what you think about this. And then we would 2 hours, we would like dissect it, whether or not it was anatomical or whether or not it was esoteric. And because we have different backgrounds, we would like, oh yeah, I didn't even think of it that way. And so it's such a gift. Why I'm saying this is like, it's such a gift to have people in your life that are different than you are. And because it gives so much amazing perspective. And so, I was like, now I lost my train of thought again. This is what happens with mama brain. We call it. So in the last couple of years, and this is in the last couple of years, like I've gone more into specifically restorative yoga. And what I love, one of the reasons I don't know if I made this connection until right now, is one of the reasons it is because Erin, in our teacher training, both the 300 and the 200 hours, speaks so much about dropping into the parasympathetic nervous system, meaning your rest and digest, or rest and renew, depending on who you talk to. Right, it's the rest and digest part of our brains or our nervous systems. When generally we're in what we call sympathetic nervous system in Vinyasa yoga specifically, right, which is the fight or flight freeze. Like we're moving, we're shaking, we're grooving, right. And then in this lunar part of class, we go more into the rest and digest, and I found that is the place that has been given me profound ease in my physical body, and then because of that, my mental body. And so in the last couple of years, I've done a lot more study around restorative, and it's been a gift to have Erin, because Erin has been doing that for many years and teaching it. And so we are coming, long story short, we are coming closer together in the fact that like we both really, really strongly believe in sustainability in body and mind, so that ideally we all live until we're 100 or whatever, let's not even 100, to the day that we're supposed to be living in a strong and healthy life, and that our bodies and our minds are in a place of ease with as much mobility and juiciness as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
It's like it's such a gift to be on this journey specifically with you in that way. Is like I feel like I've learned so much from you in that way. And then like I always sit in when Erin's teaching our anatomy portion, and I've sat through like maybe 7 or 8 of them, and I always still get new things. And that's like the gift of returning to philosophy, anatomy, whatever. Like, don't ever stop learning. I'm just going to encourage that to our seekers out there on the podcast, is like, listen and do things over and over again, because depending upon where you are, you're going to hear and feel it differently.
Absolutely, because we're evolving, right? Mm-hmm. That we're in an individual evolution. We're in a cultural evolution. We're in like the world is constantly evolving, and so if we in our teaching or in our learning like start to get stuck, then we shut down possibility. It's the same thing as like goal setting, hard goal setting. It's like, well, if you set the hard goal, you're flying towards this little hole. By the time you get to the hole that looked really big when you were like a mile away, you get to it and it's like the size of a pinhole, and you're like, and only a little bit of it gets through. And it might not even be the little bit that made the goal to begin with.
Yeah.
So, it's like hold things lightly. And I think that in that journey, it's like even, it's why like talk around alignment and everything, as you know, when I'm speaking in teaching anatomy and teaching yoga therapeutics and everything, it's there isn't anything. There's not a body. There is not a way of practice. There is, what do you want? What is if we're talking about functional anatomy, what is going on with the whole person? And that's one of the things I love about, there's a lot of argument, and I 100% agree, around yoga, all yoga being therapeutic in its innate sense. So the codifying of saying something's yoga therapy, I just want to hold lightly as well. Okay. So, but I'm a, quote unquote certified yoga therapist. And so one of the focuses of that, and ideally the focuses of all teachers, I think, and practitioners, is seeing the whole. Like, what is the function that you want to have in your life? Is your function to be able to walk up and down out of the pool using the railing and the stairs? Is your function that you want in your life to be able to go swim over to the little ladder and be able to hoist yourself up out of the pool? Or do you want to be able to get out of the side of the pool without anything around you? And so I can't say what your function is. I can't say, like, what do you want in your life? What are the things you want to be able to do for as long as you can? Or and that goes for the nervous system too. It's like, starting at a place of intense downregulating is not where we were in our 20s.
No.
And so it's also a life journey. I think that as each decade goes by, I'm 43 now, and it's like, as each decade goes by, I see that, well, yeah, of course I was doing those things with and to my body in my 20s. It was still developing and growing and in these very fundamental ways. And so, and then as I come into my 30s, well, of course, like, as the blinders of it's not like the blinders of self-reflection, it's like the blinders period, so that self-reflection could even occur, or reflection of my place in the world could occur, actually happened, which I think, is often a developmental kind of line. And I will say a developmental line coming from a North American white perspective of privilege. So I will frame that. So from that perspective, which is my individual perspective, I am seeing now that, well, of course, in my 40s, I'm starting to look at what's going to happen for the next 40, and have the ability and the trust that slowing down has just as much value as speeding up. And that I want my function to be able to sit on a mountaintop and sit there and be fine with being with myself. And I also want to get to the top of the mountaintop, but that might not be what I need to do when I'm 80, because I've been to 100 mountaintops. So, it's this perspective of growth, and this idea of not holding things hard in that same way, kind of to circle it back to the crown chakra thing, is like, if I hold the ideas and I constantly parse them apart, then I'm stuck in it.
Yeah.
And as opposed to if I'm enjoying that kind of stirring of the pot, and then adding some more spice, and then it turns into another meal and another meal and another meal throughout my life, and I get to feed on it for that portion of my life. But that I'm gonna keep questioning, how have I been constructed, and how do I continue to be constructed, and then how do I want to grow? And I might not be able to see the how I want to grow. Sometimes I just kind of got to figure it out what I want right now, because I don't know how I'm going to want to grow in 2 years. And I think of this journey with you and I, and just in anatomy knowledge too. Like, I'm not a formally trained medical doctor, medical practitioner. I'm a lay person who really, really likes to be a nerd about certain things, so my knowledge is continually growing. Like, if I could go back to 4 trainings ago and I'd be like, oh yeah, so I don't think that anymore. you know, oops.
I feel that way about my yoga videos from like 15 years ago. I feel like I'm like, oh, sorry that I gave those anatomical cues because I don't believe that anymore. I'm really
might have overspoke on that one.
And they're on the internet. You're like, whoops, sorry everyone. Just kidding. We're all just evolving. Yeah. I wanted to end it actually with Steph. Kind of, I'd love to hear your perspective in terms of your own journey as a practitioner and a yoga teacher.
In terms of like seventh chakra?
Yeah, in terms of seventh chakra and like kind of how your experience of it, of connecting to the collective consciousness, or connecting to that which is like greater or outside of yourself. First, understanding who you are, kind of putting back the question that you brought to us of like, who am I? Who are you? And then how do you relate to the world around you?
Okay, I hadn't thought about this at all. But what immediately comes up for me, and this was probably within the last year, where I was sharing with you when in the day I liked to practice. And I prefer practicing later in the day. And Clara had said, oh, that's a clearing. You're purging your day. And it's interesting. I feel like when I started yoga, I was pushing myself, thinking like following more of an itinerary, the shoulds, and just kind of going through the motions and the system of what I thought I had to do. And then as I have moved through it and connecting back to like, what are the things that light me up? Where do I feel safe? How do I express myself? Well, it's through writing. And my day actually functions best, and it's like this right now, where I spend all day writing and kind of in that imaginative space and creating, and then I clear through the practice. And it's more of like a purge from my day, and then there's the silence where the spirituality is, the collective unconscious or the divine, and just sitting in that and accepting the surrender and the trust. I kind of took a leap of faith. I signed a lease for a year on a studio that I can go and write and do yoga. I don't actually know how I'm going to pay for it. I'm like, that'll just all come together, because it does. Like just trusting and stepping in it. And I think that's the seventh chakra, to tie back everything, is that profound sense of trust in the universe.
Yes.
And this is something you've said, is that the universe, maybe you've said this, the universe is here to help and protect you. Like the universe isn't against you. It's not out to get you. And someone the other day said to me that she hates the statement, I'm going to put it out to the universe, because it's relinquishing all power, that you're giving it to this external force. And then it becomes this benevolent being that like rewards or punishes. So to get rid of that statement, instead, like own your intentions, and then just trust that your actions are going to be like there's reciprocity, right? It's a relationship.
And also to watch for the signs is the other part, is you have to put it out there in some way, shape, or form, either saying it or or writing it or whatever. And then you can't just be like, cool, sit back, relax, sit in that back seat and just be like, bring it this way. You have to be looking for the signs to be like, oh, okay, this is the sign direction. This is the direction. So the way to think, like, the idea is, yes, you want to put it out to the universe, and you have to be proactive to look for the signs as they're coming towards you, being like, okay, I need to move in that direction, not like sit back in the and then you're on the roller coaster of this, and then it's going to take you somewhere. You're still, in large and in charge in terms of moving towards it, but not sitting back,
and listening.
Exactly.
It's that reception. And Erin, you use the word surrender, which is so beautiful, because it's a opening to just what's coming up right now.
Yeah. Takes more than just writing it in a journal.
Yes, exactly. But write it in the journal and move in with it.
And do some work around it. Well, and I think that it's so interesting, because it's like, as soon as something gets brought into your awareness, and this again, it's kind of around the chakra that we're speaking to. It's, as soon as you bring it into your awareness, you are going to see more, because you have literally placed it. So like what Clara says about placing it in the world, and then following up with it and meditating and spending some time with it and making some actions, and kind of, you can test it out tentatively or you can test it out intensely. It doesn't matter. The idea is that when you do those actions, then it's putting it even more into the world and into your conscious awareness. Like if I think, oh my God, purple bikes, I want a purple bike, I want a purple bike, all I'm going to see is bloody purple bikes.
So
you know,
one thing I was talking about this book, I think last week or the week before when my father's here, there's this beautiful book on anxiety called First Make the Beast Beautiful. It's a book I'm reading right now. And one thing that I love about it, and it goes back to just to kind of tie it all together, is generally whatever you decide in your mind will actually look for clues in the world to solidify that idea. Yeah, it'll literally do that. So coming back to kind of what Steph was talking about, the opposite of paranoia, which means that the universe or the world is out to get you, is called pronoia. Rob Bresney, one of my favorite, I was going to say anthropologist, one of my favorite astrologists, but really just an amazing writer who uses astrology. He has a book called Pronoia, which means it is the universe is out to support you. So you can be paranoid or you can be pronoid. You know, it's up to you, because whatever you decide, generally, this is very general because there are definitely moments when this is not true, but let's say generally, whatever you decide, your mind is naturally going to look for ways of validating what it is that you think. So you, most of the time, I'll say, have the choice of how do you want to interact with the world around you. Most of the time, of course, there are exceptions, and that's a larger conversation and a different day, but things to think about. Yeah. Thank you, Erin, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And where can we find you, Erin? Tell us a little bit about where you are in the world.
So Moon Yoga Therapeutics is my website. And that's the easiest way to kind of get a hold of me in regards to yoga stuff. So Moon Yoga Therapeutics. And then, of course, I teach with you, and I teach with Prema Yoga Institute, which is a yoga therapy program out of New York. But of course, all things are online now. Yeah. And then as an actor, Erin Moon actor. So I do audiobook narration if you want to listen to books. And I've done a couple of yoga books. So I've done Judith Lassiter's latest book, and I did a couple.
Richard Freeman, didn't you?
Richard Freeman. I did 2 of Richard Freeman's. And Richard Freeman and Mary. And so I did a couple of books, and I've also done a couple of meditation books with Christina Findlay, which is a beautiful one with some Buddhist techniques. So, and they're just out there in the world. You could just Google them. Yeah.
We'll include Erin's information in the write-up of this podcast. So if you didn't catch all that, you can definitely just look it up in our write-up. And always a joy, Steph.
Thank you so much.
Today. I'm so excited so we're going to start having more guests on the show now, and I'm kind of expanding on this, and so I'm excited for Steph's questions. No pressure, but I'm really excited.
They're so awesome.
Yeah, always a joy to be with you, my friend. And those of us who are listening, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and we'll see you next time. Namaste. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Today's podcast was brought to you by the Practice with Clara app. That's mine. I've created almost 100 yoga classes for you to do at home or on the go. And they're available to you on your favorite device, including mobile, desktop, and TV. These classes include vinyasa, slow flow, hatha, restorative, yin, mantra, meditation. I also just had a baby, so I created prenatal yoga for all 4 trimesters. So head over to clararobertsoss.com/join to learn more. Or search for the Practice with Clara app at your favorite app store. There's a 7-day free trial, so no commitment. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We've got lots of good stuff in store for you. Until next time, namaste.